A former lowlife, but now people call me the king. Tearing it up with every lyric that I bring to the table. Because I'm willing and able, I'm in more homes than Comcast cable. I got the skill that'll rattle your brain. I'm a threat like Saddam Hussein, everybody know my name. Joe Habib's a top soldier, kid they should've told you, you really need to pack a lunch. My words hit hard just like a Tyson punch, so give me a chance, I bet you I can make you dance. Show me your girl, I bet you I get in her pants. I'm breaking egos and money is what I'm stacking. Joe Habib on the mic, you know I'm down for action. Shout out to Make Beats Sir and the Beat Smith and the whole Rope a Dope radio crew. Yeah. All right, good morning, everybody. What's going on? I hear a lot of people say the phrase pay-per-view worthy, right? A lot of people are saying that. And obviously, this is not me being a proponent and a supporter of pay-per-views. That's not what I'm about. If you want to pay for pay-per-views, you can pay for pay-per-views. As you guys know, I'm a sucker. I buy every pay-per-view. Just about. Probably 99.9% of them. I'm just that sick when it comes to boxing. But I've said this before, and I'll say it again. A lot of these fights are not on pay-per-view because of choice from the promoter, right? They're on pay-per-view out of necessity. Because again, if there are particular fights out there that these promoters cannot get rights fees from, right? They cannot get rights fees from, right? And they got to keep these guys active, and they got to, keep the lights on for themselves if they want to continue to put on fights. And if they can't get rights fees from networks and digital platforms, right, then they have to put the fight on pay-per-view. And when Showtime or Fox, even, I don't know how DAZN works. Like, I don't want to speak on the DAZN pay-per-views, but I know, when you have a distributor like Showtime or Fox, right off the bat, the way it was explained to me, and again, this is the way it was explained to me by offline conversations I had with promoters, managers, publicists in the sport. The way it was broken down to me is the distributor, whether it be Showtime, Fox, ESPN, or whoever, right? And again, I don't want to speak on DAZN because I don't know how DAZN works. That's kind of a new thing, right? But as far as it goes with ESPN, Fox, and HBO, Showtime, when HBO was around, the distributor of the pay-per-view gets 10% right off the top, right? And in most cases, they share the production costs, right? So if HBO or Showtime, they do their all access or their 24/7s, they put the money up for that. And the promoter, they share the production costs with the promoter. The promoter usually takes care of like the advertisement, the banners and stuff like that. And, they have to rent out wherever the press conference is going to be, they have to rent out that facility or whatever, so for the most part, the production costs in terms of the promotion, advertisement, and that stuff, it's usually shared by the distributor and the promoter. And then what you have is that split, right? You have that split. So the 10% off the top goes to the distributor, HBO, Showtime, ESPN, whatever. And then cable company Well, the cable companies, they get 45%, and then 45% goes to the promoter, and he keeps 25 of that 45%, and the rest goes to the fighters, right? So when you say a fight is not pay-per-view worthy, that is up to you basically to decide, in your opinion, whether or not you want to buy it. But because these pay-per-views are so expensive, even if they're doing 200,000 pay-per-view buys for some of these fights, right? Times that by 80, right? That's $16 million, right? So 10% of that, which is 1.6 million, goes to the distributor, and they're virtually take no risk. They're not losing anything really, and in some cases the distributor puts all of the operational costs on the promoter, but for the most part they usually share it, whether it's 40% to the 60% to the promoter, 40%, whatever. The distributor does, in most cases, from what I was told, they do, put up some of the money for the production costs, but regardless, they're still going to get that 10% off the top, whether the fight is wins or loses, whatever. So let's just say, subtract 1.6 million from that 16 million, right? So we'll subtract that 1.6 million from that 16 million. So there's $14,400,000 left, right? So then out of that gets cut in half, right? So then you have 7,200,000 left over, right? For the promoter, and then you basically subtract the 25% off of that. So that's 1.8 million that would go to the promoter, right? And we don't know how much money he spent on the production costs. So if he's in the promotion for the fight, so if the promoter spent more than that 1.8 million, which is left over, then he lost money. If he didn't, then he made money, right? So we're gonna have to subtract that 1.8 million from the 72, right? 7.2 million, excuse me. So we'll subtract that 1.4 from the 72. And that leaves us with 5,800,000, right? So if you look at a fight, like a lot of people, they criticize Tank Davis fights, right? And they sit there and say, well, why are these fights on pay-per-view? They must be losing tons of money on it. But okay, so I use an example because a lot of Tank's pay-per-views, and I'm conservative. Some of the Tank's pay-per-views did 250, some of them did 200,000, whatever, right? So let's just say, for instance, Tank Raleigh did 200,000 pay-per-view buys. We don't know that, but some of the Tank's pay-per-views, for the most part, they've been averaging about 200,000, right? So like I said, there's 5.8 million left, right? So then, Tank's guarantee, right, has been about 1.5, 2 million. So let's just, I think he got paid 2 million. I think his guarantee was 2 million for the Raleigh fight, right? And I think Raleigh got 500,000. So we got 5,800,000, right? So you subtract the 2 million from that. We got 3.8 million, right? So we got that 3.8 million. And then we subtract the 500,000 from that. And so you got $3,300,000 left, right? And then what you do is the undercard, let's just say, because the undercard fighters get paid shit. Let's just say you paid the undercard $1 million, right? So you got $2,300,000 left. Say the pay-per-view split for Tank Raleigh, right, was 70-30, right? So then Tank gets an extra 1.6 million off the top, and Raleigh gets another an extra $690,000. So because the purses aren't that high for a lot of these pay-per-views, this is a no-brainer for the promoters and the distributors, because the distributors aren't going to have to pay a rights fee. The operational costs are relatively low, right? So, for a fight like with Raleigh, so Tank got like maybe 3.6 million, Raleigh got like $1.2 million, whatever, in that fight. So they're not really losing money. Now, you could say and argue the point that maybe we're losing value for dollar, and that's fair. So in terms of a consumer, when you say pay-per-view worthy, that's going to be a subjective term, right? So in a lot of these fights, like I said, even Wilder Fury, I guess the third fight lost money. I can't remember what the guarantees were for that fight. I want to say they weren't guaranteed huge money for that fight, but I don't know what the operational costs were. But a lot, like in the sense of PBC, a lot of these fights, like I said, are on pay-per-view because Fox pretty much washed their hands of boxing, so they can't put the fights on Fox anymore. And they got all these fighters, right? And Showtime can only give them so many dates, right? And Showtime's only going to pay the rights fees for only a certain amount of these fights. So because you got this whole stable, this is the reason why. And I'm not defending PBC and I'm not defending pay-per-view. But you have to understand, if these fights are on pay-per-view, they're not going to happen. These fighters aren't going to be fighting, right? So a lot of times we criticize, why aren't these fighters fighting? Why are these fights on pay-per-view? These fighters aren't fighting because, again, there's not enough distributors, right? PBC has too many fighters and they don't have enough dates, right? They're not given enough dates. And if Fox has cut themselves out of the equation, which it seems to be the case, according to Marcus Villegas, right? Then here's the thing. Showtime is not going to have enough dates to accommodate all these fighters, right? So PBC is not losing a lot of money here because, again, like I said, the guarantees are not they're not very high for a lot of these fighters. And even Deontay Wilder, for the longest time, even when he was on pay-per-view, his guarantee was like 1.52 million. I think the first Fury fight, I think he got 4 million and Fury got 3 million. So that's $7 million, right? So again, Bruce Trampler said the third, either the third, I think he said the second, if I'm not mistaken. I stand corrected. I think he said the second Wilder Fury fight lost money. I can't remember if it was the second or the third, but he did say one of them lost money. He went public with it. And again, I don't know what the operational costs were. I don't know what, how much money they put into advertisement. And again, then you gotta, you're gonna give away tickets and stuff, and you gotta fly people out, and you gotta pay for hotel rooms for people, press conferences, you gotta pay for all of that stuff, people who's gonna be filming the press conferences, all that stuff. So those are operational costs, right? But at the end of the day, when you say pay-per-view worthy, you have to ask that question, when you mean worthy for who? Worthy for the consumer, or worthy for the promoter and the fighters? Because a lot of these fighters are making more money because the fight's on pay-per-view. Like Tank Davis, if the fight's not on pay-per-view and he's just going to be on regular Showtime, he's probably going to only be getting like $1.5 million, $2 million. But because the fight's on pay-per-view, he can get an extra $1.5, $2 million out of the deal. So for the fight, that like a lot of the fighters really aren't losing. A lot of the fighters are making more by having the fights be on pay-per-view than just getting a flat fee, right? Because they get back-end money, which they don't get. So the whole notion of DAZN ever saying pay-per-view is going to be dead, it's ridiculous, because there's no way, right, a distributor like Showtime, HBO, on average, you'll get the outliers, like a Mayweather got the 30 million, a fight, and even Canelo when he was on DAZN, right? They had to restructure that deal because they couldn't pay him the 30-something million, right? They had to restructure that. So at the end of the day, you hear a lot of these guys on Twitter, the so-called boxing insiders that are supposed to know the business, right? That are supposed to know the inner workings of how things go in the sport of boxing, right? I don't want to call out names because I don't want to name drop. I don't want to insult people. But if you're not getting the dates from the distributor, right? If you're not getting the dates from the platform, from the broadcaster, if they're not paying the rights fee, right, then you have no other recourse but to put the fight on pay-per-view, or put these fights on pay-per-view if you're going to keep these guys active, right? Because PBC has the largest stable in the sport, right? So whenever Showtime, HBO, right, Fox, when they were doing it, ESPN, whenever they put the fight on pay-per-view and they're the distributor, they get a guaranteed 10% of the gross, right? And they don't have to pay a rights fee. And they pay minimals, and in some cases, very little operational costs. So the risk is predominantly on the promoter. And, and the promoter can budget it out where maybe they break even on some of these pay-per-views. Maybe they make a little money here. Maybe they lose money here. But they still do have these distribution deals. Like PBC does have a distribution deal with Showtime. They did have one with Fox, right? Bob Arum, Top Rank have a distribution deal with ESPN. Eddie Hearn has a distribution deal with DAZN. So they are going to get a substantial amount of money from the broadcaster paying rights fees for a lot of their fights. But here's the thing. Showtime just doesn't have the dates. Showtime just doesn't have the budget. So they'll be the distributor for the pay-per-view, but they're not going to front the rights fees. They're not going to pay the rights fees to the fights, right? Because they don't feel it's cost effective for them to do so. They're not willing to lose money on these fights. And the good thing about the sport of boxing right now, if you're a fighter, is more people are getting paid 7 figures now than I've ever seen, because you do have DAZN, you do have ESPN, you do have Showtime, right? Because you have more and more, you have ESPN Plus now, you have Sky, you have Boxer right now. You have so many more promoters. You have so many more distributors out there, right? Before it was just HBO and Showtime, and ESPN, for the most part, just did, those Friday night fight stuff. But now ESPN, threw their hat into the pay-per-view as well. So now you have more and more entities putting money into boxing. And you have more and more boxing being shown and being available to be viewed now than ever before. So, you have Canelo, who's making a substantial amount of money. You have Tyson Fury, who makes a substantial amount of money. And you have, obviously, Anthony Joshua, who makes a substantial amount of money. But you have a lot of other guys who are still making seven figures, who probably 10, 15, 20 years ago, or maybe I would say about 15 to 20 years ago, would not be making seven figures. And the good thing and the reason behind that is because you have so much competition where these platforms and these distributors and these networks have to be more competitive now. So again, it's not a fact. Excuse me. It's not a reason of putting these fights on pay-per-view because they're great mega fights, because they're not all mega fights. But you have to look at it this way: it's either pay-per-view or the fight just doesn't happen. So you got to make a choice. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, Hellenius and Wilder is a good fight, but it's not a pay-per-view fight. And I understand where they're coming from. But if that fight's not on pay-per-view, it's not going to happen. It's not going to get it's not going to get broadcast. That's the thing. So when you say, and you hear people say pay-per-view worthy, you have to really listen and look at what does that actually mean, right? What does that actually mean? Because again, there's just so many fighters now PBC has under contract, and I'm sure, they have to give them a specific amount. I'm not sure about that, but why keep them around if you're not going to have them fight, right? That's why a lot of these guys are on the shelf, right? But once again, you're going to see Showtime put on less boxing now. You're going to see ESPN put on less boxing now because of the UFC, and even now DAZN, they're using the pay-per-view model as well too, because people are trying to maximize their revenue, right? They're trying to minimize their losses and maximize their revenue. And they're saying to themselves, we're not going to continue to take losses here. And the only way we can minimize our losses is by putting these fights on pay-per-view where we're not shouldering the majority of the risk. The risk is on the promoter now. We're taking ourselves out of the equation in terms of a risk factor here. So that's why we are where we are right now. And that's why all these PBC fights, for the most part, a lot of them are going to be on pay-per-view. And that's just the ugly truth of it all, right? That's just the ugly truth of it all, because HBO and Showtime had all these dates way back when, and they were putting on all these fights, right? Because the competition was less. You weren't seeing a lot of high-profile fights on ESPN. You didn't have the DAZN. You didn't have the ESPN Plus, right? We didn't have access. And YouTube's putting on. We didn't have access to all these fights, right? And the streaming was not as strong back then as it is now, right? And for years, you would hear HBO say that they had to cut their budget because they were putting on so many fights and paying so many fighters an exorbitant amount of money, and they were losing money, right? Showtime was in that same boat for a while where they were losing money. So this is why you're seeing more of these fights on pay-per-view, so they can minimize the loss and put more of the responsibility on the promoter, right? That's the way it is. G Funky says, the way I see it, Beeb, it's not my problem if they overvalued the fights. It can't pay them unless it's pay-per-view. Promoters need to do a better job of making stars so fans will pay extra to see it. That's a fair point. But once again, you have to make a decision. Do you want less fights, or more fights, because if these fights aren't on pay-per-view, they're not going to happen. So we can't have it both ways and complain about this guy's only fighting once a year and then say, well, if he fights on pay-per-view, I'm not going to pay to see him fight. So you got to make a decision. And again, it's up to you as the consumer to make that decision. I'm not telling you what to buy. I'm not telling you, what you think is pay-per-view worthy or not, what's worth it or not. Because like I said, I don't stream fights because I can't stand the buffering. I can't stand, and again, I kind of feel bad streaming fights because I do want to support the fighters. I do think they should get paid for what they do. It is kind of somewhat of an ethical thing to me, but more so a quality thing too. I hate streams where the freezing and the buffering. I don't want to have to deal with that. So I'd rather just watch the fight and just rest assured that I'll get a good quality, and it's up to to fans if they want to stream and stuff like that. But streaming is at an all-time high, right? And some of these streams are higher quality, but once again, if it's a huge fight and everyone's streaming it, the bandwidth is going to really suffer, and the quality is going to suffer as a result of that too. So it is what it is. But this is why these fights are on pay-per-view, because these broadcasters and these distributors, these platforms just do not want to put up the rights fees for a lot of these fights. They'd rather have the minimal risk by just getting their 10% off the top and maybe throwing a little bit here and there in the production. I mean, like I said, whereas before it was 100. If they pay the rights fees, it's 100% on them, right? That's why back in the day, you'd hear promoters get criticized because all they would do is just get the money from HBO or Showtime, and they kind of didn't do anything. They didn't really have to do much promotion, right? So now these promoters are going to have to get a little bit more creative. Now these fighters are going to have to get a little bit more creative. They're going to have to use social media. They're going to have to probably go on more podcasts. They're going to have to talk more to the press, right? More so than ever before, right? That's what's going to have to happen. That's what's going to have to happen, right? So now these promoters are going to have to step up their game. Now these fighters are going to have to step up their game too, because now the guaranteed money isn't always going to be there for every single fight. For certain fighters, it will be, right? But for others, it won't. But like I said, there's more competition now, so that's a good thing. I'm really curious to see where PBC is going to go now. I mean, I don't believe Showtime is going to be enough for PBC. Just having one distributor is going to be enough for PBC, right? Because Showtime's not as big as ESPN, right? ESPN is a sports network. Showtime is not. So they're only going to be able to allot a certain amount of dates and slots for boxing, right? So ESPN has a bigger budget. So that's why we're able to see more of these top ranked fights on regular ESPN and less of them on ESPN pay-per-view, because of the size of ESPN, compared to Showtime. Showtime has got a smaller budget. They're a smaller network. So I think as time goes on, we're going to see more and more of these fights on Showtime pay-per-view, unless PBC is able to get another distributor. What's up, my brother? How you doing, man?
Hey, how you doing? How you doing? Everything's cool here, man. I'm just into the show. I'm happy you sent a link. I just wish they could find a way that they wouldn't need pay-per-view no more, and guys could just watch the fights like the good old days, like when Mike Tyson was fighting and HBO and it went to Showtime. and they was just paying him his money straight up like that. You know, it was much better back then, much more entertaining. We didn't have to deal with the business aspect of it, and we could just enjoy the fight, man. You know, I'm thinking like the casual regular boxing fan. He wants to see the fight, man. He don't want to deal with this stuff, man. It's like most of the shows now, they all they talk about is the business aspect. I mean, just pay the fighter what he deserves, and let's just watch the fight, man. I mean, this guy's trying to do that right now. Eddie Hall,
Oh, you muted yourself. I can't hear you right now, Suleiman. Your mic went out. Your mic went out. I don't know what happened. I don't know if you unplugged your mic or what happened, but your mic went out. I don't know if you can see if you can fix it. If you want to jump out and come back in and see what happens. Yeah, now you're muted. Yeah, so I lost you.
how about now?
Now you're good. Yeah, you're good. Go ahead.
So what I'm saying is like like this is something that like
I lost you again, brother. I'm gonna boot you out and come back and see if you can come back in. I'm gonna boot you out and have you come back in. I think you have an issue with your connection. Sorry about that. Yeah, so that's the thing, man. That's the thing. And I said this before, and I'll say it again. This whole Joshua Usyk situation of not having an announcement on who's going to broadcast this fight in the United States. Everyone's saying it's going to be DAZN. Now I'm hearing it's going to be on regular DAZN and not on pay-per-view DAZN. And I talked about this on the roundtable, and I talked about this on my show with Eric, Ringside Reporter Show on Sundays. What a slap in the face that's going to be to the UK fans who have to pay for Canelo Golovkin 3 at 4 a.m, right? Where we're going to be getting Usyk Joshua probably Usyk Joshua 2 probably at like in between like 1 and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, if it's going to be, and that's going to be free for us, but these UK fans are going to have to pay for Golovkin Canelo. It's not even going to be in prime time for them. So I'm wondering if there's going to be a backlash for that. Can you give me a sound check, so let me see if I can hear you.
1 2 1 2. How you doing?
Yeah, no, you're good. All right, you're good.
1 2 1 2. How you doing?
Good, man.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
So like I was saying before, man, they got to do something, man. They got to do something like the DAZN stuff. It's sometimes boxing is frustrating enough because you got to go through the fight making and everything, and you got to learn the aspect of the boxing. Then on top of that, we gotta learn all this stuff with the politics involved with the promoters and the pay-per-view stuff. They got to simplify this shit, man, because I mean they're losing a lot of fans, man. Because like right now, all these fighting like Teofimo, for example, he's coming up now. He got a lot of youth appeal. He wants to make that fight with Ryan Garcia at 140. Um, that fight right there. I hope the promoters don't start playing this game with the pay per view and all this stuff. Just give the fighters what they want, so they can make the fight happen. And that'll be an exciting fight at 140 right now, man. Because those titles that Josh Taylor got are fragile as hell, man.
Yeah, I lost you again, Suleiman. Yeah, I'm sorry, brother. You have a bad connection. Why don't you try to just listen in for now, and maybe when you get a better connection, you can probably try to come back. I'm sorry, brother. All right. Yeah. But that's the thing. So it's going to be very interesting to see moving forward how this whole situation with boxing is going to play out in terms of fans viewing it. Are we going to see more and more pay-per-views across the board now? And I know in the UK, people buy pay-per-views at a higher rate than they do in the United States, obviously, but the United States has a substantially high cost. And I think, whether or not, you want to argue about oh, this guy does more pay-per-views, like Joshua sells a shit ton of pay-per-views in the UK, and you want to compare it to a US fighter who's only selling 250, 300,000, whatever. But when you factor in the price, who's generating more revenue, right? That's the thing. You can fill up a stadium all you want, but how much is the live gate in comparison to a casino or an arena in America? When these guys are paying 3 to 4 to sometimes 5 times the price that someone's paying in a stadium. So it's all about economics. Then you'd hear about the live gates, and again, I know Chael Sonnen talked about this recently in one of his videos. Shout out to Chael Sonnen, because I made all the sense in the world, because he's not the only one to have said this. And I've once again had offline conversations. And the live gate is not a substantial amount of revenue when it comes to, they're not depending on it's not substantial for the promoters or the fighters, when they're trying to determine profit and loss here. Because if you're gonna have to pay a certain amount of money as the promoter to rent out the arena, right? Then the ticket sales are just going to basically cover that cost that you spent to lease the arena for that night. And if it's a casino, a lot of times the casino will give you a site fee, right? Because they know that the people that are going to come to see the fight, they're going to be gambling, they're going to be spending money, shopping, the food, the beverages, whatever. So in a case with the casino, if a fight's in a casino, then that's a win-win, right? Because instead of paying a lease fee to rent out an arena or a stadium, right? If you're getting a site fee from a casino, they're going to get that they're going to get their money back, from the people coming in for the fights, with the gambling, all the extra rooms they're going to rent, at the hotel, all the like I said, all the extra people gambling. So that's a different situation. But so that's where ticket sales can mean a lot, but not even that, because that's just going to be a smaller portion of the revenue, because again, it's all about the pay-per-view. That's what it's all about. Or it's all about how much you're going to get from the site fee from the distributor. That's the blunt. These big time promoters like Bob Arum, Eddie Hearn, and PBC, Al Hammond, whatever. The majority of the money is made from the rights fee and from the pay-per-view. So the live gate is a minuscule part of it. Basically, the money you get from the live gate is the money that you put up to rent out the arena for the night. That's why all of the mega fights, the mega fights, right, have always been in Vegas. Let's look at the highest grossing fights in boxing of all time. And let's just look where the majority of them were. Right? People were saying, why didn't they put Mayweather Pacquiao? I remember I had this discussion with Nestor Gibbs back in 2015. Why didn't they put this in a stadium? Because again, you're gonna get the site fee from the casino, right? And the amount of ticket prices they can charge at the casino, all the high rollers that were going to go to that fight. It was a no-brainer to put that in Vegas, right? All of the biggest fights, Canelo Alvarez, Floyd Mayweather, another Vegas fight. Floyd Mayweather, De La Hoya, another Vegas fight. Evander Holyfield, Mike Tyson, that was a Vegas fight. Now, Mike Tyson, Lennox Lewis was not a Vegas fight because Mike Tyson could not get licensed in Vegas for whatever reason, I guess for the ear biting incident, whatever, right? That was in Memphis, right? But all of the highest grossing fights of all time have been in Vegas because again the site fee and the ticket prices that could be charged there, you know. So let's see if I can see some more fights here. Floyd Mayweather, Miguel Cotto was a Vegas fight. Vanna Holyfield, George Foreman, I think that was an Atlantic City fight, if I'm not mistaken. Which again, you get another site fee there, right? From a casino. So Mike Tyson, Peter McNeely, another one. So all these in the top 10 highest grossing fights of all time. 8 of them were in Vegas, and one of them was in Atlantic City. So they're all been in casinos. So that's just the way it is. So I know a lot of people love to talk about these stadium fights, this, that, and the third, but the highest grossing fights of all time have been in Vegas. No stadium fight will ever generate more money than a big time Vegas fight. Just won't ever happen. Right? Where the biggest fight in boxing right now, in terms of a revenue generator right now, I think very, very clear that it's going to be Canelo versus Golovkin. And where is that fight going to be? It's not going to be in a stadium, right? It's going to be in a casino, right? It's going to be in Vegas. So every year, more often than not, the highest grossing fight has always been in a casino. When Wilder fought Fury, all 3 times I believe it was in Vegas. It was like in a casino. No, I think the first fight was in California. I'm sorry. But first fight I think was in California, but the next 2 were in Vegas. Why? Because once the popularity increased for that fight, right? Once they saw that more people were interested in that fight, what did they do? The next 2 fights were in Vegas. So all of the biggest fights are always in the history of the sport are always going to be in Vegas. There's no fight that's going to be in a stadium that's ever going to break a record in Vegas. No fight's ever going to beat Mayweather's records. No fight. It's impossible. My opinion. This is my opinion. Do I think the casinos profit after all paying all? Yeah. You know how much money they make in gambling? You know how big of a business gambling is? And then you got the sports betting too. Like, and then you got the revenue for the hotel rooms, then the food and beverage. Forget it, man. It's a no-brainer. Are you back, brother?
Yeah. You can hear me better now?
Yeah, you're great now. You're all set.
It was the mic. The mic's no good.
Okay. The mic's no good. Okay, we got you. So go ahead, man.
So yeah, man. I mean, you know, you got a good show today because you're talking about the pay-per-view and all that. But this is something that the promoters should do about themselves and not put in the public, man. Because we don't want to hear about that, man. How about a young coming up boxer, right? That wants to fight in the Olympics, right? And they say he's a Golden Glove and he wants to become a fighter in the Olympics. Pay the kid his money that he deserves when he becomes pro, right? Like a Ryan Garcia. Look at Ryan Garcia. He doesn't even have a world belt. He makes more money than all these champions. And everybody complains about Oscar de la Hoya not paying his fighters, but Ryan Garcia is really comfortable, man. Ryan Garcia is getting paid more than Errol Spence. So, you know, I don't understand this stuff that everybody is condemning Oscar de la Hoya, which when he was a pro fighter, he was a gold medalist and a great fighter himself. And his clone, Ryan Garcia, is the highest paid fighter in boxing right now. So all this baloney that I'm hearing about pay-per-view this and pay-per-view that, their fighters are getting underpaid because look at Tank Davis. Tank Davis doesn't make more money than Ryan Garcia, and he got that B-class belt all around his waist. And then the other guy, what's his name? Spence. He's a unified champion, but he doesn't make more money than Ryan Garcia. So what I'm saying, Ryan Garcia does have a point. And the youth is looking at that hey, why do I need a world title belt if I don't got a world title and I make more money than all you guys? And you guys are dissing my promoter, but my promoter's the best, highest pay, is paying me more than all you other promoters paying. Al Heyman is supposed to be allegedly paying more, and he's not, because Oscar De La Hoya pays his fighter Ryan Garcia more than everybody else. And the cash cow of boxing, Saul Canelo Alves, was a golden boy fighter also. So I don't know, something's wrong there, man. Something's wrong there. Could you maybe elaborate more about this?
I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with you on Ryan Garcia making more than Tank Davis. I think he makes good money, don't get me wrong. But Tank Davis is making in between, because his fights are on pay-per-view, he's making in between $3.5 to $4 million to $5 million. Ryan Garcia is making, he got $2 million for his last fight. He's making good money, don't get me wrong. But as I explained earlier, because these guys have you got a guy like Spence, you got a guy like the Charlos, you got a guy like Tank Davis. They're getting $1.5, $2 million guarantees, right? Even if the fight is doing 200 to 250, maybe 300,000 pay-per-view buys, when all of the money is taken out and their portion of the pay-per-view is left over, they're getting anywhere from 1.5 to 2 million in back-end money, sometimes 2.5 when you factor in, because again, the pay-per-views are $80 a pop. So Ryan Garcia has not been on pay-per-view yet, but he's still making good money for not having a world title. But I still do think Tank is the highest earner at lightweight because he's on pay-per-view. If he wasn't on pay-per-view, I think it would all be relative. You know what I mean? But Devin Haney was making pretty good money on DAZN from what I was told, from what was being reported. He was getting in between $2 million to $3 million a fight, and those weren't even pay-per-view fights. But I still think Tank, on average, is making more than all of them. I would say he's making in between $3 to $5 million a fight because he is on pay-per-view. So again, the pay-per-view model is still the best model for the fighters. It's not the best model for the fans, still the best model for the fighters. Because again, it's also a great model for the distributor, because once again, they don't have to put up the rights fee. They're spending minimal money on production costs, if any, depending upon the deal they have with the promoter for the specific pay-per-view. In some cases, they could probably say, and have said in the past, you guys got the production costs. But a lot of times, when they do the all access and stuff like that, the 24/7s, whatever, even DAZN doing their shows to promote the fight, that's costs for them too. How much that is, I don't know. But I still think that for these fighters to get paid and for these fights to be shown, this pay-per-view model isn't a necessary evil. As much as I hate to say that, this pay-per-view model is a necessary evil that will never go away and may even increase, and has increased over time. Because now everybody's doing, ESPN never did boxing pay-per-views up until a couple years ago. DAZN never did pay-per-views, right? Now you got Sky, who are probably going to do more pay-per-views now, because now they're working with more promoters. They're working with Wasserman now. They're working with Boxer, right? Ben Shalom. So there's going to be more and more pay-per-views coming down the pike, right? Now, does that mean there's going to be more streaming? Or now we have to look at, even now in the UK where the pay-per-views were relatively cheap, what are they doing now in the UK? Even in the UK now these pay-per-views that used to be $20, now they're $25, $30, sometimes $35, right? When you do the conversion rate. So everyone is raising their pay-per-view price and putting more fights on pay-per-view in order to pay these fighters and in order to put these fights on. I'm going to make a prediction, guys. It's going to get ugly for boxing fans moving forward in terms of having to pay for more pay-per-views and more out-of-pocket. I did the math. I'm going to be honest, like the amount of money I spend on boxing a year, I'm spending like $1,000 a year on boxing. Almost $1,000, Suleiman. I'm buying every pay-per-view. I'm paying for DAZN. I'm paying for ESPN Plus, right? I even have that what's the other one there? The Paulie Malignaggi thing. I even have that app now too. What's that called? That one? I'm trying to remember what that box talk or something like that. I even have Pro Box TV. I even have a membership to that. So I got memberships everywhere. And I'm paying for pay-per-views. I'm spending $1,000 a year on boxing. Think about that. I'm not proud of it. I'm just saying. That's what I do. So it's gonna get worse before it gets better for the consumer. Go ahead, brother. Oh, shoot, your mic went out again. I feel bad, man. Your mic keeps going out on you, brother. Feel bad your mic keeps going out on you, brother. Oh, God. Sorry, man. Let me kick you out again and see if you can jump back in. We'll keep trying there, man. But it's a shame that you can't stay on here, but because you have great takes. But yeah. So that's the gist of it, guys, man. That's the gist of it. So this whole thing about pay-per-view worthy, pay-per-view, you got to make a decision. Do you want more boxing or less boxing? And if you don't want these fights on pay-per-view, then ultimately as a boxing fan, you're going to get less, you'd have less boxing available to you. It's either have the fight or not have the fight. So it is what it is, man. But I'm going to jump off. I think I may jump on later. I want to talk about this Teofimo Lopez Campa fight tonight. I want to maybe go over some betting strategies for that fight. But until next time, Beaver's out. Make sure you check me out on the Ringside Reporter podcast every Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern time. And the roundtable sometimes on my channel and sometimes on D-Styles channel, 8 p.m. Eastern time every Thursday. And shout out to everyone in the chat. And thank you for all the subscribers and supporters. Hit the like button, subscribe, share the video. Until next time, Beaver's out. Take it easy. Have a great day, everyone. Stay safe.